Welcome to this first screencast for the Biblical Greek Primer video series. And what I'm going to do in this screencast is two different things. Number one is that I'm going to walk through the different resources that I'll be using and encouraging you to purchase them from Accordance. And then I'm going to walk through how to configure Accordance. I'd really encourage you as you look at the different screencasts to have your computer up and running with Accordance on it so that you can see what I'm doing and follow along. And if our copies of Accordance are functioning the same way, it's going to be a lot easier to do that. So that's what this first screencast is all about. Let's begin by going to the class page at Technia. So go to technia.com. And you can either type in /Greek Primer or you can click on the online classes link and find the Biblical Greek Primer and go there. This is the home page for the class, and the table of contents is over on the left-hand side. And let's go to the first of the classes, because what we have listed here are all the different resources that you need and then some recommended ones that you might want to consider looking at as you get further into your Bible study. Now, I hesitate at one level to show you these because Accordance may decide to package things a little differently over time, but I'll keep this page updated so it reflects what Accordance is doing. If you don't own Accordance and you want to buy it and everything in the Mounts Greek Study System, then that's what the first package is all about. This is the cheapest way to get everything you're going to need. Now, if you already own Accordance, you may want to look at the next package down. If perhaps you already own a tagged Greek text, then maybe the next one down. But like I said, just click through and see what Accordance is offering. As you scroll down, though, you'll see the individual parts of what the Mounts Greek Study System is. The core of it is the Mounts Reverse Interlinear New Testament. This is a translation that Dad and I did. And when you purchase this, you will also be getting our Concise Greek-English Dictionary. That's not a separate product. It comes with the translation. This is a translation that we did specifically for people who know a little Greek or want to know a little Greek, and to help them go deeper into their Bible study. The whole translation was designed around that basic philosophy. And what it's going to allow you to do is not only see the English, but you're going to be able to see the Greek that lies behind it. You're going to be able to do what are called key number searches. And it's going to introduce you to the whole wonderful world of word studies. So it's an important part to have. The next part is the Mounts Expository Dictionary. This is Accordance's enhanced version of my word study book. And then the package also includes a Greek New Testament that is tagged by me and by a fellow named Rex Koivisto. And these are the three pieces you're going to want to have to follow along in the Mounts Greek Study System. Now, the Greek text is not absolutely essential, and I'll show you in a bit what that module allows you to see and what you won't be able to see if you don't have it. But it's a pretty important component, so we made it part of the basic package. Now, what you're going to find is that as you get used to doing your word studies, you're going to want additional resources. And so I've listed a couple of optional ones here. The New International Dictionary of the New Testament Theology, the abridged version by Verlin Verbrugge, is a really, really good word study. And I suspect that most of the time, when you're wanting to find the meanings of words, that my expository dictionary will take care of you. But if you ever want to know more, then this is the book to get. BDAG ultimately is the Greek dictionary you want for really detailed kind of exegesis. You don't really need it for the Greek Primer approach, but when you get into Church Greek and eventually Functional Greek, you're going to really want to get this one. It's a little expensive, and so we left it as optional, but I'll show it to you in a bit and the kind of information it's going to show you. But those are the other two really good modules to do word studies. Now, of course, you're going to need at least one other Bible so you can see biblical text in parallel. And you want to make sure that you get a Strong's Bible. In other words, you can get an ESV or you can get an ESV with Strong's. And it's really important that you get the ESV with Strong's. In terms of how Accordance names its modules, a Strong's Bible will always have an S appended to the end of the name of the Bible. So, example, the HCSB is the Holman Christian Standard Bible, but the HCSB-S is going to be the Strong's version. But it's really important for what we're going to be doing that you always have the Strong's version of the Bible. Now, I would strongly urge you to get the ESV with Strong's. And it's not just because I helped translate the ESV. It's because my Greek dictionary is tied into the ESV at one point. And again, I'll show it to you in a second. But I would really encourage you to have at least the ESV. But currently, Accordance also offers Strong's versions of the NASB, the New RSV, the Holman Christian Standard Bible, the King James, and the New King James. So you should have at least one additional Strong's Bible so you can put it in parallel with the Mounce translation and be able to compare how we've done stuff. I guess I should add that one of the reasons that you want a Strong's version of these Bible is that they are going to allow you to do key number searches. In other words, it's the Strong's component that allows you to get behind the English to the Greek and Hebrew, and you won't be able to do that if you don't have the Strong's version. So just make sure you get the Strong's version. As you get further and further into Bible study using Accordance, what you're going to want to start doing is getting other reference books, dictionaries, commentaries, things like that. And I've listed a couple here for you to consider. The first one, the Essential IVP Reference Collection, is the one that I'll be using the most in this Primer video series. In other words, I'm going to show you how to be looking at the text and then go over to IVP's one-volume dictionary and their one-volume commentary, and perhaps some of the other tools that are part of this collection. But there's other reference books that are really good as well. I really like the Expositor's Bible Commentary. This is a really, really good multi-volume commentary on the whole Bible. Tyndale Bible Commentary series is another series of commentaries written by world-class scholars, but written for lay people. And they're all very good resources. And I'm going to keep this list updated. And so when you may be looking at the website, you may see more options there. But in terms of the video series, it's the Essential IVP Reference Collection that I will be using in the screencast. So that may be the one you want to pick up initially. As you scroll down the page, you get to the chapter material section. And this is actually the main part of each lesson. For almost every lesson in the Primer, I'm going to have what is called a saved workspace. This is a file that you can download, and then you double click on it to start Accordance. And what it does is it opens up your copy of Accordance so that it looks exactly like mine. It's just a way to make it really easy for you to follow along. So you need to download these files for every time. So just click on the link and then tell it where you want to save it. And these workspace files are all zipped, and so you're going to have to uncompress them. On a Mac, you just double click on it. Windows has its way of doing it as well. And then you have the workspace file. And when you double click on that, that will start up Accordance. And I'll show that to you in just a second. But make sure you've downloaded that while you're at this page. What comes next then is the actual lesson, and you can watch the lesson using flash technology, which right now is probably the best, but you can also watch the lesson using QuickTime technology, and if you're on something like an iPad, you'll have to use QuickTime. And then this is also where you can watch the screencasts. So the basic chapter material is right here. Now finally, what I have done in this first lesson is that I've listed the Accordance tutorials. The first link is simply to their tutorials page, and you can see what all of the videos are. And again, these are really good, and you should spend time on this page if you don't already know how to use Accordance. What I've done below that is listed some of my favorite power tutorials, the ones that show some of the more advanced features and the kind of features that you'll be using in the Biblical Greek Primer video series. So that's just there for you to kind of look around, and you can choose to watch what you want, okay? All right. Okay, now we're done with this. So let's actually go to Accordance and let's start it up. So double click on the workspace file that you downloaded, and here's the screen. Now this is a very simple layout, and I have it set to search in the Mounts text, and it's searching for verses, and then I've got it displaying the results in the Mounts text and in the Greek text and in the ESV text. Now if you don't have the Greek text or the ESV, then when Accordance starts up, it is going to give you an error message, but hopefully you've purchased these, so it's going to come up. And this screen is highly configurable. I mean, for example, if you wanted the GNT to be to the left, you just go over here to the Mounts text and grab it, move it, and everything shifts. I kind of like to keep the Greek down along the bottom sometimes, so I click on this button and it puts the Greek down there at the bottom, and you can drag the divider to make the sizes just the way you want them. But one of the really nice features in Accordance is that you really can configure it to be any way you really want. But let's go into Preferences so that we can make sure that our programs are running the same way. So go under Accordance and pull up Preferences, or Command Comma if you'd rather. And let's just work through some of these. First of all, under General, go to the Startup section, and I would really encourage you to set the pop-up to default session. Of course, you could do this any way you want, but these are the settings that I have found most valuable. What's really nice about the default session is that ultimately, when you're all done with the Primer series, you can configure Accordance to look exactly like you want it to look in terms of what text are showing and where they're showing and where things are placed on the screen and all that kind of stuff. And when you get it just the way you want it, you come back here and you click the Set Default Session button. And that means that every time Accordance starts up, this is what it's going to look like. So it's just a real easy way to get it configured properly. Under the Information section, I keep all four of those checked because I don't like pop-up screens. And under Amplify, I would encourage you to look at the second option, the Require Selection for Amplifying, and I'd encourage you to leave that unchecked. Now what that means is when you're looking at a word or a reference in Accordance, all you have to do is click inside it somewhere, and you can go look up a commentary and it can figure out what verse reference you're looking at, or if you click inside a word, you can go to a dictionary and look up that word. If this option is checked, then what you're going to have to do is to select all of the word or all the reference. And I just don't like doing that, but set it the way you want. But my encouragement is to leave that unchecked. Next we go to Appearance, and on this window there's a couple of check boxes I would encourage you to check. The first is Suppress Sticky Menu in Buttons. What a sticky menu is when you click on a button that pops up a menu. If it's a sticky menu, then the menu stays up even if you don't hold the mouse button down, and that means you have to click on it again to close it. Maybe I'm just kind of old-fashioned, but I like the way of doing it where you click on a button and you hold the mouse button down. The menu stays up as long as you hold the button down. But anyway, you may like sticky menus. You make your own choice there. The other checkbox is the Suppress Tool Auto Sizing checkbox. And I leave that checked. I'll show you in a later screencast how that affects things. You go down to Text Display, and what this does is this shows you the default settings for all of the biblical text. Basically, Accordance divides things between texts and tools. And so the texts tend to be Bible texts, and the tools tend to be things like dictionaries and commentaries. So this is the default setting for how your texts are going to display. Now you can override this setting for each individual text, but this controls the default for all new texts. Now again, personally, I like to hide red letter. I don't like it visually or really theologically. I suppress the poetry because it takes up a lot of screen space. But again, you can go through and set this up the way you want. One of the really neat things on this page is under the text section, you can choose what color background you want. And I tend to use white for some texts, and I use parchment for other kinds, but you can do it the way you want. There also is this wonderful leading setting. Leading is how much space there is, not between paragraphs, but between lines. And my eyes are a little old and a little tired, and so I like a little extra room between the lines, especially for the Greek text. And so you can pull the slider back and forth to choose how much leading you want. You go on to tool display and you have basically the same kind of settings, but now these are the default settings for your tools, dictionaries and commentaries and things like that. If you go over to the hypertext section, you can see that I have the default text set to mounts, and then the alternate text I have set to the ESV. This is an important setting, especially the alternate text. If you're doing a mouse over a reference, and if the mounts text doesn't have that reference, then Accordance needs to know what text to use to show the reference. Well, since the mounts is only a translation of the New Testament, it would be able to show you Old Testament verses. If you put the ESV in there, it'll show you the Old Testament out of the ESV when you do your mouse overs. But again, anyway, you can set that to any way you want. Next, you can go down to the Greek and Hebrew section, and I would encourage you to, under Unicode export, to have this one checked. Export all characters with Unicode format. This just means that when you copy some text into Accordance in order to paste it into your word processor, it's going to switch the Greek and Hebrew over into a Unicode format, which, if you don't know what that is, that's just the latest technology with fonts, and it's a way to get the Greek and Hebrew cleanly into your word processor. Now, if you want to use a regular Greek font, or I probably should say an old-fashioned Greek font, you could uncheck that option, and then you can go to the pop-up menu under Export Character, and you could choose the font that you want, Technia Greek, which is mine, or one of the other ones. But I would overall encourage you to keep the Export All Characters with Unicode format checked. And just one more. Under Instant Details, under the section entitled Key Highlighting, make sure that that checkbox is checked where it says Enable Instant Key Number Highlighting. Without that, Accordance isn't going to connect the Greek and the English together. So you want to make sure you have that checked. And then also under Greek and Hebrew section, just make sure that all those options are checked and you've selected full words and not abbreviations. This is important because what you're telling Accordance to do is to tell you everything about the Greek behind the English. Now, it may be that after you get comfortable with what these different Greek terms mean, and as you develop your own preferences, you may not really care for example, the word syntax to be shown, or you may want abbreviations. You can come back and check those later on. But for right now, it's really important that Accordance tell you everything that it knows about the Greek behind the English. So that's what these settings are for. The same goes for the key numbers section. You want to make sure those are all checked. So that's it for the basic preferences. Go ahead and click the OK to save them. And now Accordance will know how to start up every time you start it. So what I want to do now is just quickly run through the resources that we've talked about just to help you see them on the screen. Up here in the left-hand side, we've got the Mounts New Testament translation, defaulted to Matthew 7:13-14, which are two of my favorite verses. And over to the right, we have in parallel the ESV, and then the Greek text is down below. Now go ahead and take your mouse and go to Matthew 7:14 and put the mouse over the word life. See what happens? It selects life in the ESV, so I and the ESV both use the same word here. And you look down at the Greek text and you can see that it's zoein. So life is the translation of the Greek word zoein. If you go all the way to the bottom into the Instant Details box, you can see that the gloss, the basic definition of the Greek word is life. It is GK number, And I'll be talking about that. GK is another system like Strong's numbers. But this is GK number 2437, and the dictionary form is Zoe, and it's transliterated ZOE with lines over the O and the E. If you don't know what that all means, you're going to be learning pretty quickly. Now, if you bought the Greek New Testament tagged, there's going to be a second line. And what that second line is showing you the actual form of the Greek word in the text. In other words, while the dictionary form is Zoe, the actual form in the text is Zoane. And then it tells you some additional information. It's a noun, it's feminine, singular, accusative. Remember back when we were on the website and I was talking about the different resources, I said if you don't buy the GNT, then Accordance is not going to be able to show you a certain kind of information. This is what I was talking about. So if you don't have the GNT, all you're going to have is that first line in the instant details. And for the Greek primer, that's the information that's most important. We're going to get a little bit into the second line of information, but most of our focus is on the first. But especially if you want this fuller information, and especially if you're going to be getting into Church Greek and Functional Greek, you really need to have the Greek text. So I would encourage you to buy it early on. And if you do, you're going to have both of these lines of information. Now let me give you just a little preview of some of the cool stuff that lies ahead of us. Make sure your mouse is still over the word life in the Mounce translation, and look down in the bottom to the instant details, and then press your Command key. Ooh, what happened? Well, what happened was, Accordance said, well, this word life is a translation of a Greek word Zoe, and when you hold down the Command key, it goes to my concise dictionary, and it gets you more information about the Greek word behind the English translation life. Cool, huh? Its GK number is 2437. Its Strong's number is 2222. It occurs 135 times. And then you have a much fuller definition of what the word means. Well, let me show you another thing you can do. Go ahead and let up on the Command key and triple click on the word life. Now what just happened is really important. Accordance opened up a second zone, and that's one of the really powerful features in Accordance, that you can have these different zones and you can set the different zones to behave differently. And I really like my dictionaries and commentaries to show up in one zone because I don't want them to move when I'm moving through the text. I like them to stay as they are. And that's how these things can work in the zone. And you can click here in the middle and you can drag, and so you can make the zone perhaps a better size for you. Well, here again is my concise definition of Zoe. And you can see in the references like Luke 16:25, when you do a mouse over, it shows the translation spelled out down in your instant details. Now let me show you, I'm just showing you just a couple of quick little things. This kind of whets your appetite. Go over and click on the GK number 2437. What it just did was it said, go find every place that Zoe occurs in the New Testament and display it in the Mounce translation. Pretty cool, huh? This is how you find out what words mean, because one of the fundamental steps in word studies is to see how it's used throughout the Bible. And of course, you could always choose to put another translation up in parallel so you could see how different translations handle the word. Now, if you go back to the dictionary, and this time they'll click on Strong's number 2222, this did the same key number search, but this time it used the ESV. That's why I said earlier, if you're going to buy a second biblical text, you really need to buy an ESV, because this thing is hard-coded in there. But it's just another way to do a search of the word Zoe, but showing the results in English. Now, if you go over to the 135X, which is, again, how many times the word occurs in the New Testament, and if you click on that, it does the same search, but this time it does it all in Greek. So it's just different ways to get quick searches that are pretty cool. Now, if you go down, again, let's say pick Luke 16:25, and you do your mouse over, and let's say for some reason you don't want the Mounce translation to be that secondary text. Well, what you can do is that you can set the defaults as I said, on a tool-by-tool basis. So click anywhere in the Mounts Greek Dictionary window, and then go up under Display and choose Set Tool Display. And what you could do is under Text, you could say, you know what, I would really rather have this come up in the King James. And then if you want that to be the default, you click Use as Default, and then Save, and then the OK button. Now when you do the mouse over on that biblical reference, the translation that's being shown in the instant details is the King James. So you can really configure accordance on a text by text and a tool by tool basis for however you want to do it. Now go ahead and look at the end of my entry on Zoe, and you're going to see a right pointing arrow. If you do a mouse over, it tells you in the instant details that this is going to indicate a cross-reference to my expository dictionary. In other words, if you click on the word life, it opens up a second tab in this zone, and it brings you to the Mounts Expository Dictionary. And what it did is that it searched all the titles in my dictionary for the word life. Now you notice there are 3 hits. In other words, 3 times in my dictionary the word life occurs in one of the titles. Well, give life probably isn't what you were looking for. So if you click the down triangle, the marked down triangle, you go to the next of those 3 hits. Well, this happens to be it. This is the entry for life. And you can page through this and you can look for the Greek word Zoe. Another way to do it is, again, I'm just going to mention this, we'll come back and talk about it more. But if you hold down the Option key and click the disclosure triangle to the left of the word browser, what it does is it goes right down to the word life. And you can grab this divider and you can make it bigger so you can see it. And you want to go down to the New Testament, and there's your word Zoe. So you could have just paged through the article, or you could have used the browser window to get there a little more quickly, especially if it's a big article. So you're working on your Bible study or your sermon, and you're reading on the word Zoe, you're reading on the word life, and my guess is that for most of our situations, what you need to know is going to be in that dictionary. But let's say in this particular instance, you say, I just need to read more about Zoe. I want to go deeper in my word studies. If you go to the 4th paragraph, you'll see the initials NIDNTT-A. If you move the cursor down over the abbreviation and then look down in the instant details box, you can see that this is a reference to the New International Dictionary and New Testament Theology Abridged. Now, if you have purchased this additional word study, then what you can do is that you can click on the page numbers 226 to 28, and it's going to load in Verlin's word study book. Now, it went to page 226, and the article for Zoe may not be at the beginning of that page. So again, hold down the Option key and click the disclosure triangle by the browser window. And you can look down and go, oh, there's Zoe. So you can click on Zoe and close out the browser. And this is his article on Zoe. And what you're going to see is that there's a lot more information here, isn't there? It has what the word meant in classical Greek, and then you go to its use in the Old Testament, probably the Hebrew equivalent, but also the Septuagint. And you scroll and you scroll, you get to the New Testament, and you get the idea. There's a lot more information in Verlin's book. Now, you don't have to have it, but again, I would really urge you to get it. It's a very, very good word study book. And unless you're in a seminary class, I doubt you're ever going to have more information than the NIDNTT has. Now, I did mention the Great Big Greek Dictionary, BDAG, earlier, and let me just give you an idea of what it has. If you go back over here and click on the word Zoane, just so Accordance knows that that's the word you want to look up. And then if you purchase BDAG, of course, you can go over here to the Greek Tools icon and click, and there's BDAG. I have it listed first because I use it so much. And this is BDAG's entry on Zoe. And as you read down through it, you can see it's much more technical information. It includes information from outside the Bible. It's a really marvelous resource. And so it talks about Zoe, meaning life in the physical sense, transcendent life, and you can just kind of scroll through and see the kind of detailed information it has. For most people who are doing just the Biblical Greek Primer series level, BDAG is probably a little too much, but it's something that in Church Greek, but especially Functional Greek, you're really going to want to have. We're almost done, but let me just show you a couple of other quick features. Dictionaries and commentaries, and then something called the library window. Let's say you're studying Matthew 7, 13, and 14. So we're going to go back and click on the first tab. And you're going along and you come to the concept of life and you say, I want to read a dictionary article about life. Well, all you have to do is click on the word life and then go over to the reference palette and click on the icon for English Tools. That's the capital A. And let's look at the IVP New Bible Dictionary. So you select that and it goes to the Book of Life. You'll notice there are 17 hits. Again, that means that the IVP New Bible Dictionary 17 times has the word life in the entry. And you need to get down to the discussion of life by itself. And you could use the downward arrow, or you could hold down the option again and click the disclosure triangle, and then just scroll through the entries, go down to L, and scroll down until you get to life, and you can see the article. Different ways to get through a lot of material. But let's say you want to actually read a commentary on Matthew 7:14. All you have to do is to go over to the reference, and you can triple click on the 14, and it goes to the first commentary that's in your list, which is your default commentary. In this case is the Tyndale commentary, and it looks it up for you. If perhaps that's not enough information, you can make sure the 714 is selected, and then go back to the resource palette, click on the 1:1 icon, and choose a different commentary series like the EBC, and it'll pull it up and you can read it there. So let me show you just one more thing and then we're done. You'll notice that when I triple clicked on the reference, it loaded the Tyndale commentary. And if you go over to the resource palette and you click on that icon, you'll see that the Tyndale commentary is listed at the top. Well, how does that happen? What that means is that the Tyndale commentary is my preferred resource, and so when I triple click on a reference, it pulls up that commentary. And you're going to want to be able to set that commentary to your preference. Well, the way you do that is you go to Window and choose Library Window. And this is where you have all your different resources. And if you go to Reference Tools and click the disclosure triangle, you can see the order in which these tools are listed in the menu. So once you get used to Accordance and how you want to use it, you should go to the library window, find your favorite resource, and drag it to the top of its section. And that way you can have quicker access to it while you're using Accordance. Well, that's it for the first screencast. I wanted just to show you the resources and kind of whet your appetite for the kinds of things that we're going to be able to do. Thanks for watching.